Have you ever wondered why that PS5 was so impossible to find for many months? Or why airplane tickets suddenly triple in price during holidays? Or also why that house you've been eyeing suddenly jumped $50,000 in price overnight? It's not just corporate greed or random chance. It's something far more fundamental that affects pretty much every purchase you make in your life. I'm talking about supply and demand, the invisible force that controls prices in ways most people completely misunderstand. Now you probably think you know the basics. Low supply plus high demand equals higher prices. But there's a lot more to it. Sometimes supply and demand mechanics work in fascinating and super counterintuitive ways most experts never talk about. The common belief is that prices are primarily set by companies trying to maximize their profit. But when you look closely, you'll see that even the most powerful corporations are ultimately at the mercy of these economic factors. So let's quickly cover the basics to make sure we're all on the same page before we get to the juicy stuff. At its core, supply and demand is the economic relationship between how much of something exists, the supply, and how many people want it, the demand. When these two forces meet, they create something what economists call the equilibrium price, essentially the natural price point for any good or service. Let's look at concert tickets as a practical example. The initial supply is fixed. There are only so many seats in the venue. When now a popular artist announces a show, demand spikes immediately. If Taylor Swift were to announce a surprise concert with only 20,000 seats but 200,000 people want tickets, the price would immediately skyrocket. And this isn't just theoretical, we saw exactly that happen with her Eras tour, where retail tickets hit $20,000 or even more in some markets. Conversely, if a band that was popular a decade ago now announces a tour but interest has kinda gone down, they might end up discounting tickets just to fill seats, because same supply, less demand equals lower prices. Understanding this fundamental relationship gives you predictive power. When you see supply constraints forming in any market, you can anticipate price movements before they even happen. And this applies to everything from graphics cards to your morning coffee to even housing markets. Now, these basics are crucial to understand, but if you don't grasp this next concept, you'll miss the most powerful aspect of supply and demand that even economics professors sometimes overlook. Elasticity is essentially how sensitive prices are to changes in supply and demand. Some products barely move in price even with massive supply changes, while others fluctuate wildly with just the slightest market shift. The key insight here is that necessity determines elasticity. The more people need something rather than just want it, the more inelastic the demand becomes, meaning people will pay almost anything to get it. Let's consider insulin, for example, a life-changing medication for diabetics. Even if the price triples, diabetics still need to buy it to survive. Their demand is highly inelastic, meaning it barely responds to price changes. Compare that with luxury watches, for example. If Rolex doubled their prices tomorrow, many buyers would simply walk away. That's elastic demand, high responses to price changes. Although we'll get to the Rolex example in just a minute, there's something really special about this. Now, for the practical application, when investing or making a purchase, identify whether you're dealing with elastic or inelastic goods. For real estate investors, properties in areas with strict building restrictions, meaning limited supply, and strong job growth, meaning increasing demand, create inelastic markets where prices can rise dramatically. You can see this firsthand in cities like San Francisco or London. For consumers, understanding elasticity helps you time purchases. Elastic goods, like electronics for example, frequently go on sale and have very predictable price cycles. Inelastic goods, like certain medications or essential services, rarely offer significant discounts, so waiting rarely pays off. Elasticity explains why some markets experience wild price swings while others remain stable despite similar supply-demand dynamics. This single concept explains everything from why college tuition increases to why diamonds maintain their value despite not being particularly rare. In economics, nothing happens in a vacuum. Markets are connected, sometimes in obvious ways and sometimes through invisible threads. When the price of one product goes up, people naturally shift to alternatives. This behavior is called the substitution effect, and it's a big reason why price changes in one area often spill over to others. Let's say beef becomes more expensive. Many consumers will then buy more chicken or plant-based alternatives. And as demand for those alternatives rises, the prices go up too. Not because anything changed in the production, but because they're now acting as a substitute. And this ripple effect isn't just about groceries. Take the construction industry during 2021, for example. As lumber prices skyrocketed, it was up by nearly 400% at one point, builders scrambled for alternatives. Steel framing, concrete blocks, or even shipping container homes suddenly started looking more attractive. But as demand then shifted towards them, these materials got more expensive too. So the pressure simply moved to the next link in the chain, you could say. And we saw a similar pattern during the pandemic housing boom. As prices in big cities soared, many people started to looking for something further out, to suburbs, smaller towns, even rural areas. Those locations weren't necessarily cheaper because of lower demand, they were cheaper because they hadn't yet become the substitute product. Once remote work became mainstream, suburban real estate estate essentially became the replacement good for urban housing. People who recognized this early and invested accordingly often saw huge returns. The substitution effect is a reminder that markets are constantly adjusting. If one option becomes too expensive, people will look elsewhere. And when enough people shift, the elsewhere gets expensive too. That's why forecasting is so difficult, and also why spotting early shifts in behavior can give you a real edge. So whether you're making a personal financial decision or studying economic trends, always ask, what are people likely to choose instead, and what happens if they actually do? So now we've seen how supply, demand, and market conditions shape prices. But what happens when human psychology enters the equation? Let's talk about how our perception of value can sometimes override economic fundamentals entirely. Up until now, we've talked about prices as if they were driven by logic, supply, demand, and market behavior. But there's another powerful force at play: human psychology. People don't always respond rationally to prices. We respond to perceived value. We compare things, we anchor to reference points, and sometimes we even want to pay more, not less. Take luxury brands. A handbag that costs 200 euros to produce might sell for 2,000 euros. Not because of its material, but because of the story around it. Brands like Hermes or Rolex don't just sell products, they sell status, scarcity, and identity. Rolex is a perfect example. The company could easily produce more watches. They have the resources, but they intentionally limit supply because it creates exclusivity. And when demand rises, they raise prices and demand still follows. Why is that? It's because the price itself becomes part of the appeal. A Rolex isn't just a watch, it's a signal. The higher the price, the stronger that signal becomes. This is known as the Veblen effect, when rising prices actually boost demand because people are buying prestige, not just function. We see this strategy everywhere. High-end sneakers sold in limited drops, special edition cars with long wait lists, concert tickets that sell out in seconds and resale for thousands. And it's not just scarcity. Brands also use anchoring to influence how valuable something feels. If a sofa is listed for 2,000 euros and now on sale for 999, it feels like a deal even if it was never worth 2,000 in the first place. Or consider tech models. Apple's known for launching high-priced Pro models to make the regular version feel more affordable, even if both are priced above the market average. This all goes to show that prices aren't always about cost or even value. Sometimes they're about story, framing, and emotion. And when that perception takes hold, people will pay far beyond what's rational. At the same time, it's important to remember that not all products behave this way. Most products still follow logic. If prices rise, demand tends to fall. But in luxury sectors or emotionally charged purchases, higher prices can actually fuel more desire. So if you want to be a smart buyer or a smart investor, learn to spot the difference between real value and perceived value. Ask yourself, is this price driven by quality and scarcity or by branding, hype, and signaling? Understanding this difference helps you avoid overpaying and also helps you identify assets where emotional pricing might actually work in your favor. So what did we just uncover? We broke down how supply and demand create the price for almost everything. We explored elasticity, the hidden force that explains why some markets barely move while others go haywire. We looked at the substitution effect, where price shocks in one market trigger chain reactions in others, and we unpacked the psychology behind pricing, showing how branding, scarcity, and emotion can override logic, especially in luxury markets like Rolex. So what do all these ideas have in common? They show us that prices aren't just numbers, but they're signals. They tell stories about scarcity, demand, value, and behavior. And the better you understand how those signals work, the more power you have as a buyer, as an investor, and as someone navigating an increasingly complex economy. Because here's the truth, if you truly understand supply and demand, you don't just react to prices, you can predict them. You recognize when something is truly expensive and when something is just marketed that way. You see when a price spike is temporary or when it's signaling something deeper. So if this breakdown helped you see the economy a little more clearly, subscribe for more economy content like this. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.